Aiboan and greetings to everyone. Aiboan is a word used in Sri Lanka to greet someone. It means long life. I'm Prarthana from the AP committee. On behalf of the Asia Pacific Regional Committee, I warmly welcome all of you for the webinar today and thank all of our participants for joining for the Fundraising Fund Development webinar. I would like to welcome the WAG's Volunteer Fund Development Capacity Building team who will be facilitating the webinar today. And I'm really great. We are thankful to them. We are thankful to all our MOs who are working tirelessly to continue girl guiding and girl scouting during this challenging time. We do understand that fund development and fundraising are important to all of us, both individually and organizational wise. At the current context, diversified fundraising is our short and long-term priority. With changes in the government priorities, lack of disposable income for families, and a potential decline in individual giving, there is a challenge to find new and innovative ways to plug these gaps. Therefore, we as the APR committee felt fund development would be an ideal topic for today's webinar from the series of webinars which we are conducting for our MOs. Today's webinar will introduce you to the key fundraising principles and skills that will help you in sourcing new partnerships and raising funds. It will be an interactive session with a lot of discussions, tips that will help you to start on your fund development plan. The webinar will be led by our amazing team of fund development capacity building volunteers of WAGs. We kindly request you to be fully focused during the webinar to ensure you and your fellow participants get the best value from the experience. Give me a minute, let me start the presentation. So, technical information for us to start the webinar. This will be an interactive video webinar on Zoom. We would like all of you to switch on your video during the webinar. Kindly mute your microphone during the session and unmute for group activities and discussion so that other participants will not get disturbed. Bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you will have the mute button on the computer screen and upper right on iPad. Please use the chat to ask questions. The team will monitor questions throughout the presentation. During the questions and answer time, kindly raise your hand. There is a reaction button on the Zoom screen. This meeting will be recorded and we'll share the link after the webinar. And now I would like to hand over to Rupa Gautam, the regional coordinator, to carry out the next part. Rupa, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Prarthana. Hello, everyone. I'll just do the introduction part of our country since we are so many people here. We will not be able to go to the individual discussion. I'll just call out the country name, and then when I call out the country name, if you could wave your hand or give us some sign that you are there, that would be helpful. We received the registration from 14 countries, and some of the countries are still joining us, so it might take time for to join us. But I'd like to call out the name of the country. So from Hong Kong, are we here?
Yes, we are here.
Oh. And then we have Nepal. No, okay. Malaysia?
Yes, we are here.
Bangladesh?
Yes, I'm here.
Thailand?
Yes.
Myanmar, anyone here from Myanmar? Okay. Maldives,
Yeah, we are here from Maldives.
Sri Lanka,
Gayani from Sri Lanka.
welcome Gayani, Taiwan,
Jeff from Taiwan. Hi, everyone.
Pakistan,
Yes, we are here.
do we have anyone from India? Okay. Cook Island, okay, we have few countries missing, maybe they are joining us, and along with the countries we have our cat mentors, few cat mentors who are helping our member organization to complete the cat and select the priority areas. So we have Karen, who is the cat mentor leads, along with Gwen, Carling, Tammy, and then also Datu Jaya being one of the cat mentors. So I welcome you all.
Thanks, Rupa. There's a few of us here.
So moving next, we want to do a small poll about to understand your fundraising experience. So when I'll start the poll, you'll see a question in your screen. You have to select one of the options that applies to you. I'll give a couple of minutes for you to complete the poll, and then we'll move forward with the webinar. So I have launched the poll. See if you could see the questions and if you could answer it. 2 minutes to complete the poll. You have half minute, 30 seconds more to complete the poll. We have received 59% of the participants vote, but we are still waiting for the rest. So thank you everyone for the for sharing your fundraising experience. I'm going to share the result, and along with sharing the result to you, I hand over it to John to take over the webinar, who is the fund development volunteer lead for our capacity building team of fund development. So John, over to you.
Joe, you are on mute.
Joanne? Is Joanne coming back? I think she's...
Give us few minutes. Joanne?
Okay, while we wait for Joanne to come in, I think I'll continue with this. As you can see,
Okay,
the
sure.
poll results very clearly that, only 42% have a little experience, which means majority of you have some experience in fundraising and have written grant proposals, and very few have participated in face-to-face meetings. So, and only a handful, I think only 4% show that they have reached out to an individual to ask them for donations. So we hope that at this webinar, we'll be able to, give you more information on how you can be empowered in your fundraising efforts. Looking at the next slide, we have, just a minute, let me just close this. I want to thank all of you for responding to our questionnaire in our pre-survey. From your questionnaires, we've learned that most member organizations have fundraising experience, especially in the submission of grants. Majority of your funds are from strategic partnerships or from events, and a handful of you who are school-based have received funds from the government. The main challenges in member organizations in fundraising are the lack of programs and events during this pandemic season, and we understand that, but at the same time, we know there are great opportunities out there that member organizations can make use of. And finally, we found that most member organizations' fundraising priorities are around revisiting strategies and to explore new avenues of funding. So thank you very much for your response. This has given us information on how we shape our webinar this morning. So I'll hand over now to Joanne to begin the webinar.
Thank you. Thank you. We have had a really extraordinary planning team here, and it included Prantha from the Asia Pacific region and Rupa and Ching as our key people, and then our capacity building volunteers. So we will be presenting together, and we were grateful to learn from you what you wanted to learn, and we hope we will be, yes, next slide. We hope that we will achieve these objectives today, that you will have an introduction to key fundraising principles and practices, that you'll have an opportunity to build skills and confidence, and also to begin or to refine or strengthen your fundraising plan. We also hope that you will learn about other capacity building resources so that this is just a beginning and that you continue your work following this webinar. So you've already heard the welcome and overview. we're going to present a simple fundraising framework. We will talk about the fundraising case, your fundraising plan, how to make an ask. Then we will have some small group discussions and then learn more about WAG's resources. So the fundraising framework. We thought it would be important, whether you are interested in seeking government funding or going to individual donors or identifying strategic partners or looking to corporate executives or foundation officers for funding, to have some skills that would be helpful regardless of what your fundraising priorities are and who you're going to for to raise money. So we're going to talk about the case, the plan, and the ask. And we think that if you have a good case and you have a good plan and you have a good ask, you will be very successful in fundraising. So let's begin, and Laura's going to start with the case.
Thank you, Joanne, and hello, sisters, I guess, and brother Jeff there in guiding and scouting. Delighted to be here. So in this section about the case, we're going to set the stage for that successful fundraising journey Joanne described. But before we even can look at creating a plan, we need to make a case. Next slide, please. So what is a case? Or often in fundraising called a case for support. It's your story. It's why you need support. So cases for support can come in different formats. While they're usually described in a written document, it could be a 2 or 3 minute video. It could be a 1-page document or a multi-page document, a PowerPoint presentation with slides. The main thing is it's a tool that helps you ask for money. And remember, you're never asking for money for yourself. You're asking for an important cause and for the girls. Now, it doesn't matter if you're asking for a relatively small amount of support for a simple project or a complex project. You still need a case for support and a story. So, what describes an effective case for support? Urgency. And a good case for support speaks to both your heart and your mind. So that means there needs to be some emotion, and you need to back up the emotion with facts. Sometimes when we're seeking financial support and donations, we can make the mistake of wanting to put in lots of facts and statistics. This is important, and it's important often to have details and a budget. But first and foremost, you want to get people's or grant makers or government's attention with an emotional hook or a story. Speak about the impact a donation will have. What's going to be different? How will things be better in your community, in your country? We say in the fundraising world that no matter how wealthy an individual or an organization or a grant-making group is, no one really wants to give away their money. But people do want to be change makers. They'll donate if they're convinced by you that they can help bring about change. Next slide, please. So, you're working on your case for support, possibly with a committee, with the board in your guiding organization. And as you're developing your case and coming together and discussing and deciding what needs to be in your case, how are you going to use it? Not just for asking for money, but also to help train your volunteers and your staff to be confident before they meet with potential supporters. You can bring a case or a written document with you when you're meeting with people and asking for support. Very often, and I think many of you have experience in writing grant applications, a grant application really is a case for support. So imagine you have a short period of time with someone. It could be that you're riding a bus for a few stops, or you're taking a lift or an elevator in a building with someone. And they say, tell me about that Girl Guiding project you're involved in. You need to be able to give a short, enthusiastic message that describes the need or your case. In North America, we sometimes call this your elevator pitch or your lift pitch. So you can imagine that is how you need to use your case for support. Next slide, please. So in the time of the pandemic now, how do you make your case stronger? Many member organizations are struggling and have had funding, typical sources of funding cut. Probably it'll be a long time before there's any fundraising events organized. So use the opportunity of COVID to use some messages of urgency. So now more than ever is the time to strengthen leadership skills. Remind funders that Girl Guides, more than any other organization, helps prepare future leaders. If possible, bring along Girl Guides or use them via virtual meetings or in videos to help tell your story and tell your case. Particularly in grant applications, it's sometimes tricky to add emotion because you're filling in information that's required. So the ability to have someone verbally even tell a bit of the story makes a difference. During COVID, and governments do want to be seen as making a difference, helping out in some way during a time of crisis. So if you can make your case that if they partner with you by supporting Girl Guides, they will be seen as good corporate or government citizens, that can help strengthen your case. And certainly, always think about, are there any female leaders in politics, in business, in your community or country who maybe you can appeal to during this pandemic because your usual sources of funding are gone? Next slide, please. So now we're going to have a little bit of an exercise. We're going to look at a real example. So this case for support was actually presented as part of a grant application to UNICEF from the Malaysian Girl Guide Association. Many of you, I think, have experience in writing and submitting grant applications. You know they're often very long. So today we're just going to look at an excerpt or a portion from the grant application. A program budget and the financial details were in a different part of the application. We're going to look more at the story or what we're trying to achieve and why. So before we look at the first example, in the next slide, please, we're going to look at some questions that are good questions to have in mind when you're creating your own case statement and when we look at analyzing or studying these case statements. These are questions that we should be able, a good case statement answers. What problem are you trying to solve? And why are you the right organization to make it happen? How will the money be used? So not just how much do you need, but how are you going to use it? Importantly, specifically, what will be different when the problem is solved? And how will I know that you spent the money well? So being accountable. So I think we're going to move on the next slide, and you're going to have a little bit of reading, so you can just sort of read the case statement. I'll be quiet. And then after, we're going to have a little bit of a poll and a discussion. So here you go. Is that, are we okay to move on? Is that enough time, or?
I think so.
You think so? Okay. So you can see what the need is. So now, just sort of your initial reactions. I believe that Magically Rupa is going to help me and pull up a poll to rate the case statement. So would you rate it as weak, average, or excellent? If you could please just respond, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So thank you very much. I think the poll is complete. So the majority of you had responded as average, and then the next as excellent. So thank you very much. And there's no right or wrong answer, of course, because just like anyone who's being asked for money or support, everyone has their individual reaction. We are going to move to look at a different version. And again, just keep in mind, does the message touch the heart? Does it contain enough information? And does it answer those questions about what problem are we trying to solve and what's going to be different? So I'll just leave again on the screen the second version, and then we'll move into looking at what the differences are. Thanks. Do you think has enough time? Are we ready to move on? Or we're okay? Okay, so thank you for reading that. Next slide, please. So in this enhanced version, so I will say the case for statement, even in its first version, was quite good. And I think the majority of you said good. But in this second one, it has been strengthened. And I'll just highlight a few of the differences. So things to think about when you're creating your story or your case. So in the first instance, the problem was described quite generally. In the second instance, it was backed up with some specific statistics, which I think someone listening or hearing or reading would find quite interesting, about skipping breakfast, the consumption of soft drinks. So a little bit more specific than just poor eating habits and malnutrition. I thought they did a really good job of adding some emotion, because as I mentioned, sometimes in grant applications, it's hard to be emotional because you're having to be quite factual. But in the second statement, instead of simply being concerned about the health of children, it spoke about really broad-reaching impact that's going to damage individual health and the nation's economic development and peace as a whole, which is a little bit more of an emotional message. And then when we think about what are you going to do with the money, that's where it's important to specifically speak about the impact. How can you measure success? And in the second example, rather than just saying forums were going to be held, they talked about the number of participants, from which communities, and geographically where they would occur. And I'm happy to report, of course, the second example was the actual example. And next slide, please. I really would like to express, oh, there's more differences. I almost forgot. So before I move on to my message of thanks, again, the why and being a little bit more specific. So when you're reviewing your own case for support, look at it with a critical eye where you remove kind of what we would sometimes call weaker words. So instead of saying you hope someone will support, try to use words that are a little bit more confident and powerful. Why is this going to make a difference? Because you are going to educate and empower the younger generation to be agents of change. So speak about why you're the right organization. Talk about the number of girls that your guiding organization impacts, and that'll make your case statement stronger. Next slide, please. So I want to express deep gratitude to Chief Commissioner of Girl Guides of Association, Jayadavi Subramaniam, who I know is on the call. It was very gracious of you to let me use your grant application to UNICEF without knowing how I was going to use it as an example. It's a strong case statement, and I understand that UNICEF is reviewing it now, so we of course wish you every success in your application. And now that you have a sense of you've built your story and your case, now it's time for the plan. So next slide.
Thanks,
Yeah.
thanks, Laura. So the plan, and again, emergency planning during COVID is something that most all of us are engaged in. And that's also true about fundraising. Next slide, please. The first part of developing a plan is really creating a culture of giving in your member organization. So you may ask, what is a culture of giving? And some people call it a culture of philanthropy. Well, we're going to have a poll, and I'm going to ask you to choose, do we have the poll up, Rupa? I'm going to ask you to identify what you believe is part of a culture of giving. There are 10 questions, and you get to say yes or no. So begin the poll now, and then we'll talk about it. Everyone in the MO can articulate the case for support. Yes or no? So you press the next to go to the next question, which is staff, receptionists, and secretaries greet all guests with respect and enthusiasm. Yes or no? And I don't have to read them. You just keep going. Keep pressing next and answer yes or no. And Rupa, I think you'll let me know when most everybody has answered. So it says on my screen next. I gather some people it's a scroll, but you press next to get the next question. And there are 10 questions. And if you missed one, you go back and it says previous, and you get that question. And once you have answered 10 questions, then we will have a result of our poll. Oops, apparently 10. Okay. All right. Okay, so here are your answers, and I will tell you what correct answer is, so to speak, everyone in the MO can articulate the case for support. And yes, that is in order to develop a plan, we have to have people who can execute the plan. And executing the plan includes making a case for support, as Laura just helped us see. Number 2, staff or receptionists, secretaries greet all guests with respect and enthusiasm. And we have 89% of us that said yes. And it is really true that our offices, our camps, our homes, if we're talking with people, all reflect our commitment and our interest in the movement. It might show up with pictures of girls on the wall. I have an interesting story in that a friend runs a homeless shelter here in Philadelphia. And one day, someone came to inquire about the shelter and asked, could they have a tour? And the receptionist said, certainly, and took the person on a tour of the shelter. And the guest was very impressed. And later they learned that this guest was a staff person for Bono, the rock musician. And Bono has been giving funds to that homeless shelter ever since, for 20 years. So you never know who is coming and who might be a potential donor. Question 3, donors are wealthy people. Well, we're a little split on this. The answer is actually no. They could be wealthy people, but in fact, people who are not wealthy give more money to charity than people who are wealthy. So it's certainly in terms of percentages. So it is important that we realize that a donor can be anyone who is committed to the organization. Next. Oh, it scrolls. Thank you. So you can scroll. Number 4 is donors get the message they are important, valued, and considered. And everyone understands how important that is. Because if they don't feel that you appreciate what they're doing and they aren't let in on what is happening in your organization and what impact your organization has, then they are not going to continue to give. Leaders of the organization are visibly involved in fundraising. The answer is yes. And often people on boards are not clear that fundraising is part of their job. And one of the things that is very important when recruiting and orienting board members is to let them know that fundraising is expected because they are the leaders of the organization and they are models for commitment to the organization. And it's very hard to ask someone else for a gift if you haven't made a gift yourself. So that relates to the next question, which is every board member makes a meaningful gift. And the answer is yes. Because again, board members are role models. They are modeling the way. They are showing other people what it means to be committed to the organization. When I say meaningful, it means it's meaningful to that board member or other leader in the organization. People have different means and different amounts that are meaningful to them. Someone who has a lot of inherited wealth can make a much larger gift than someone who is working a regular job. But everybody can give something. Number 7, donors are thanked promptly and appropriately. Again, the answer is yes. And one of the things that I have heard donors say is how much they appreciate when the thank you comes from the girls who might be at an event. Here there's we have a corporate fundraising event for Girl Scouts, and they all get their names in the program for their contributions. But at the event, the little girls have signs that they have made that says thank you to that business or company, and they decorate them. Well, those corporate executives love that part of the program where the girls are thanking them. Donors receive regular updates on the organization's programs, activities, and impact. Yes. Again, we can't expect donors to contribute if they don't know what they're contributing for. So our job is to keep them updated on the achievements, programs, activities, and even the problems and needs of the organization so that they feel like they are part of the family. 9, staff, volunteers, and parents are invited to contribute money as well as time. Well, I am thrilled to see that 75% of you said yes, because sometimes people think if I'm giving time, I don't have to give money. But again, our staff and volunteers and parents are the people most committed to the organization, most likely to know and care about its achievements, and are closest and therefore most likely to know the value of the work and to contribute to it. And this 10 is the same, but the question I had was, fundraising is only done by adults. And the answer to that one was no. And I just shared some of the ways that girls can be involved. Older girls can come on visits. They can, girls can speak on videos. There's lots of ways to take the girls directly to the funders. So next slide, please. So these are all what makes your organization ready to develop a plan. Your leadership is visibly involved in fundraising and makes a personal gift. Everyone in the MO can articulate the case for support, and the MO operates in a donor-focused way. Next, please. So we thought you could take a minute now to think about your MO and to think about all those elements in that help create a culture of giving, and assess your MO. Poll, please. So how strong is your MO's culture of giving? The choices are not sure or don't know, strong, has many of these elements, or weak, needs work. Okay, Rupa, do we have responses yet?
10 more minutes, please, because it's only 63% has.
Okay. So this is your chance to think about your MO and assess it.
The result is up, Joan.
Okay, here we are. So about half of you think it's strong, and about half of you think that it's weak and needs work, and a couple of you are not sure. So I think this really gives you something to think about in terms of what are the ways that you can improve the culture of giving of your MO. Next slide, please. So once you've done that, the next step is to identify sources of funding. And one of the suggestions during time of COVID is to hold a virtual meeting of your board and identify who is most likely to give to your MO during the pandemic. You may have done a little research in advance, but often your board have connections and they may be helpful in helping you identify potential sources of funding. And they can also help you solicit funds. When looking at individuals, first identify those who are closest to your organization. As I mentioned before, they can be parents, they can be staff, they can be community people, they can be people who are committed to the development of youth and girls. Consider asking individuals or particular individuals that you've identified who care deeply about your mission for a special gift in this time of need. You might even identify a wealthy donor who would give a larger amount than usual as a challenge or matching gift that would be contingent upon you being able to get a certain number of new donors or raise a certain amount of money. No one knows how long the pandemic will last. So it is really an opportunity to look very broadly at foundations, NGOs, local businesses, community organizations, corporations, and other philanthropic initiatives that provide grants and loans. There are organizations that are also providing emergency financial grants during the COVID pandemic, and you may be able to identify some of those funders with the help of your board. Then you need to prioritize your list of diversified funders. And when I say diversified, I mean, you may want to ask some individuals, some corporations, some foundations for funding, because you don't know right now where you're going to be most successful. And if previously you were dependent on one source of funds, like membership or like government grants, you know how hard it is to continue your work when you are dependent on one funder that you could easily lose. So having a variety of different funders really helps you secure funding going forward. Next, please. So we're suggesting that you select for your plan and research at least 2 different sources of funding. Some individuals and some foundations or NGOs. When looking at individuals, look at, if you have current donors, look at their giving history. Look at who knows them best in the MO, who might be the best person to ask them for an additional gift or a new gift. Always, the people who are currently giving to you are going to be the people most likely to give to you in the future. But you also need to identify new potential funders. And those individuals who are interested in your organization or may be interested but have never made a gift are called prospects. And what is important is to see what their ability is and their interest in giving a gift. And to think about this creatively, it may be that a businessman who has 3 daughters who have participated in your program may be an excellent prospect. It might be someone who was, as Laura had mentioned, is prominent in your community and is an alum of the organization. Might be a good prospect. So make your list of donors, people who have given, and also your list of prospects, people who might be willing to give if they're asked. And then with your foundations and NGOs, look at people who may have funded your organization in the past and review websites, looking to see whether the focus of that foundation or business is in alignment with your MO's mission and need. As we mentioned before, some organizations might be giving emergency COVID grants. And if your MO are helping with service projects and or need technology to support new ways of work, these might be good opportunities for emergency COVID dollars and dollars to help people change their organization to meet the needs of girls from a distance. Next, please. Then there's a question of how much money do you need to raise? And it is important to identify some very specific goals and an amount needed. For example, are you looking to add a specific number of new donors and funders to replace revenue no longer available? Do you have needs for additional funds for new and unanticipated COVID-related expenses? Have clear and measurable end result in mind. Also begin thinking about how you will define success, all part of that case that Laura talked about previously. Then put together a fundraising team. And a team can, you can invite fundraising professionals from the community to join your team. It can be some parents, it could be some board members. But once you get your team together, identify their individual skills. Somebody might be great at public speaking or writing or have great networks, but your team needs a whole variety of skills. And then you need to identify exactly the number of donors to ask and to really estimate what your donor potential is. How much money do I need for a particular program or to replace funds that I'm no longer getting? Then what will it take to raise those dollars? Next, please. Creating a pyramid of gifts can help you answer those questions. It's a pyramid because at the top are fewer donors who give larger gifts, and at the bottom are many donors who give smaller gifts. Next, please. This is an example of a pyramid of gifts. And you can see, oops, somebody's unmuted. You can see that you may need something like 44 donors to raise a little over $5,000, right? But you can see that how this works. And it also shows what is kind of a rule of thumb, which is the 80-20 rule of donor giving. And that states that 80% of regular donors give 20% of the contributions, and 20% of major donors give 80% of the contributions. So you can see how that works out in terms of the dollars. But you can put this together and then it helps you identify what level of donor you need to reach your goal. Next, please. So I'm going to turn it over to Rose, and who will talk more about the plan.
Thank you, Joanne. So Joanne has taken us through setting the groundwork for the plan. Now we look at actually writing the plan. The number one indicator of fundraising success is having a plan. So your plan needs to tell you where to focus your efforts. It helps you set the goals and your goals need to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. They also need to be realistic. So we shouldn't be overly ambitious that we are not realistic at all. But we need to be ambitious enough knowing that it's a realistic goal. The slide gives an example. Oh, sorry, not next slide. Yeah, this slide gives an example of a plan which is COVID related, and it gives objectives and what the financial goal is. I'll give you a minute or two just to read it. We've read it. Can we move to the next slide? So we had an objective and we had a goal. So just with reference to the financial goal, make sure, again, that it is realistic, achievable, but challenging enough. A right goal will motivate the volunteers to do all it takes to meet the needs and to work harder to achieve success. So who will you solicit and how? Remember, we've done a bit of research. So screen the foundations first to determine if their interests and priorities match yours. When possible, call them to clarify if you have any questions before you submit your grant request. Normally, they will give you a contact and a time frame when you can do this. There are many ways to solicit individuals depending on your relationship with them. You could have face-to-face meetings, you could have phone calls, letters, online campaigns. These are all strategies you could use to solicit donors. Just a reminder, not everyone will give. So you will need to solicit very many people before you get that one who will give you the gift. Next, who is responsible? You've put together your team. You have a list of potential committee members. Make sure you have a dedicated fundraising team. It could have the different members from board, from staff, passionate volunteers, community professionals, people who you know will get the work done. But you must have somebody who will be responsible. Next what are your action steps? As you develop your plan, make a list of the actions that you need to take to help you achieve the organization's goals and objectives. Make sure you also identify your time frame for each action step so that you keep within your timing and you get to succeed not only in getting the funds, but also in getting it at the right time. Make sure you focus on the details necessary to succeed. And another important aspect is monitoring your plan. How will you do it? How frequently will your fundraising team meet to monitor the plan? Keep checking, assess periodically if you're meeting your goal. Are you still on track or are you going off? Are you exceeding your expectations or are you falling short? These all help you to make sure that you actually get to your goal. So once you have this plan, make sure you're monitoring it and you definitely will be on your way to fundraising success. The next slide, please. So we've gone through the plan. We've had a bit of research. We've had a bit of what needs to go into the plan. We'd like to ask you if you have any questions. And because we can't see anyone, we can't see everyone, could you please use the raise hands on Zoom so that we can see who has a question? We'll probably take one or two. Any questions so far? I see shaking heads. And I don't see any question in the chat.
There is a
there is one question on storytelling. Can we park that question because we are going to look at it in the next section when we do the ask? Okay, Gwen? So let me hand over to Tina to take us through the ask.
Thank you, Rose. So we've talked about the case, we've talked about the plan. Your MO has a great case, your MO has a great plan, you have people involved. It's now time to make the ask. You have to ask for money at some point in order to get money. If you don't ask, you won't get. This applies to all kinds of funding requests. You need to ask for money from individual donors, just as you, in your grant proposal, ask for money from a foundation or a corporation. In this section, we're going to focus on making an ask in person, a person-to-person conversation, request for a donation, for example, asking someone to help sponsor an event or to make a contribution to a project. You remember the pyramid that Joanne showed in the plan, that wide base at the bottom, the thick part in the middle, that's made up of lots of smaller donations, middle-sized donations. All of those people, all of those corporations and small funders need to be asked. Next slide, please. So just to review a few things that we've already talked about and to get you ready to make an ask in person. First, remember, people give money to the people they trust. When you look at those circles, like concentric circles, that blue dot in the middle is you. That's you, and the circle, the yellow circle out, are the people you know who are close to you. And the green circle after that are the people that you are acquainted with. And the pink circle on the edge are further out. Everyone in your organization has something similar. You stand in the center and you have a close circle, your family members, the neighbor next door. That would be your yellow circle. You have contacts beyond that. The green circle could be the husband of your best friend who works at a bank. And the pink circle further out might be a friend of a friend who knows someone. The reason it's important to think this way is because people give money to people they trust. The relationships are an important element of making that funding request. We've talked about all of the different individuals that you might ask: government officials, individual donors, corporation executives, partners, foundation officers. In all of those cases, there are often opportunities for person-to-person conversations. It is important to have partners when you are making asks, sometimes to go together to make a request, sometimes to prepare together, and of course, to cheer one another on. Thinking about relationships and working with existing relationships, remember to think about people who have been past donors to your organization. When I was the new executive director of a small NGO, I went through the paperwork and found the names of businesses and individuals who had given grants and donations before, and I went to introduce myself and to rebuild a relationship from which we could make a request for funding. A friend of mine who was an executive director of an environmental organization knew that they needed money for a garden, and one of the volunteers had a friend who was wealthy, but the volunteer said she would never ask for money, but she was happy to introduce my friend to her and to set things up so that the conversation could go forward with a request for a very significant donation. Next slide. When it's time to have a person-to-person meeting to ask for a donation, There are 5 things to plan for and be prepared to say. And these 5 are from my experience and experiences of my colleagues who are longtime fundraisers. Number 1, in your conversation, you want to connect to increase the donor's sense of trust and confidence in you. Number 2, your case. Why is support needed? As Laura said at the beginning, this is your story. And if you have a good case, you're well on your way to making an ask. Number 3, in your meeting, you need to share a personal connection to the case and the work. Your personal story connected to guiding, or your personal commitment and contribution. Number 4, you need to be very clear and specific about the amount of money you are seeking. It's easy to have a general conversation about a project and how the organization needs money, but in a person-to-person conversation asking for funding, you want to be really specific, the amount that you are seeking and the amount that you are asking this donor or sponsor to give. And the number 5, you need to be prepared to say these words during the course of the meeting. And that is, could you support us with the contribution of that amount? Could you make a donation of that amount? I said earlier, it's good to have a team because it's good to have someone to prepare with and to practice with so that in your conversation, you can say these things and be prepared. Next slide, please. So we are going to give you, Ching Ching and I are going to give you an opportunity to listen in to a real example of my experience raising funds. Several years ago, I was the director of a small NGO in California, and there was a volunteer in our organization who made small donations every year to our organization, but our board members knew that she made much bigger contributions to other organizations, 5 times as large as what she was giving us. And as we were preparing to raise funds to expand our youth program, we decided that we were going to ask for a larger contribution from her. This was one of the first times that I was asking one-on-one for a large contribution. So I'm going to share how it went. Please listen now to my conversation with Mrs. B and how I made my ask. Oh, Mrs. B, it's lovely to sit and have some coffee with you. How is your son?
Oh, he was taken ill with severe stomach aches last week. But you know what, Tina? He's fully recovered now. I'm so glad.
Oh, that's great. You know, he was such a great volunteer on the annual tree planting event we did last year. I hope to see him, and I hope he'll be on my team when we do that tree planting event this year.
Great.
Mrs. B, I told you when I called to make this appointment that I wanted to talk to you about fundraising and the monies that we're trying to raise for the youth program. You know, we're raising funds to expand the youth program in the area around Bahia School.
Yeah, I know about that. I've heard about this new program.
Well, and I want to tell you that it's doing really, really well. We have a new grant from a family foundation, and I'm very happy to say that the school has decided we can use one of their rooms for our after-school club meeting. That is going to allow us to have a gathering place for the teens in that neighborhood. And you know, the teens in that neighborhood have very, very few activities, no after-school activities at all.
Yes, I've heard about that area, and it's so exciting, Tina, that we're launching into a new project.
Well, I'm very happy to say that there's a lot of excitement about it, but it's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take us a total of $50,000 to be able to do this. Mrs. B, you've been a great supporter of the center for years, and we really appreciate everything you've given in both your time and your donation. And I thank you for giving me a chance to talk to you about this new project.
Yes, I mean, I'm really excited. You know, Tina, you always, are so enthusiastic about new projects. Thanks for sharing this.
Well, we have foundation money, a little bit of foundation money, and we have a committed board ready to raise funds from individuals. The board has said they want to have more individuals participating in donations for this project. And I'm so excited about this that I've made a contribution myself to the fund. I think it's just going to be really, really great to have something lasting in that part of the city. It's not just the 50 children or 50 teens who will be served, but it will be a lasting program that the school will continue to do as a lasting contribution for that part of the community. I get very excited myself when I think about it.
Yes, I can see that.
So, Mrs. B, I'm hoping that you are going to be able to support this project as well with an individual contribution that's larger than what you've given before.
Oh, Tina, I'm already a donor, and I'm also a volunteer. I don't know about this project.
Mrs. B, there's no question you are a really important part of our organization and your regular volunteering. And I know this is an additional request, but I feel so strongly that our community needs to have a youth program in that part of the city. We're asking all of our longtime donors to increase their contribution this year if they can.
Have you asked Mr. Willis? Has he donated?
Yes, we have plans to reach out to people of all different levels of income. We are talking to wealthy people as well as people with less money. And we have created a card here. I want to show you. This card shows the new levels of donor giving, donor recognition that we are working with. And we're looking for contributions starting at $1,000 up to $5,000.
These numbers seem quite high as compared to your previous donation drive.
Yes, that's right. It is more, and we think that it's worth it. We think it's really important that that part of the city has the program for the teens there. So it's a range from 1,000 up to 5,000, and I'm hoping that you can see yourself on that card somewhere, and you could consider making a contribution of that size.
I have to think about it, Tina. I don't know if I can give you an answer today.
Of course. But we are trying to collect donations or pledges, that means a promise of a donation, by the end of the month. Mrs. B, could you consider that? Could you consider making a contribution of the size on that card and let us know your decision by next week?
Well, Tina, I'm just so passionate about this work. Okay, all right. I think I'll make my decision now. I will donate.
Oh, yay. Thank you so much, Mrs. B. All right. So that is the story. I did ask for a large contribution, and Mrs. B actually did not say yes right away. I had to wait about a week, and she came into the office and just handed me an envelope and said she was very excited about the project. So that is my experience. Next slide, please. So let's review what happened in my story. Number one, we did make a connection. Mrs. B and I talked about her son's illness and how I had done a volunteer project with him. Number two, shared the case, told the story about the youth program and the community where I knew Mrs. B already had an interest in youth activities. Number 3, the amount of money we were seeking. Number 4, my personal commitment and enthusiasm. I had made a donation at the time. Compared to what we were asking Mrs. B, it was a small contribution, but still I was part of the donor pool and I could speak about why I gave my contribution. And then in the end, that request, Mrs. B, could you see yourself making a contribution of this size? So I made a question that she had to answer yes or no to. So that is my personal experience and recommendation about when you are approaching an individual to talk about a donation. At this point, we're going to give you a chance to talk to one another about your experience with asking for money. And Rupa is going to put us into breakout groups, and there'll be a facilitator in each breakout group to help you talk about these questions that you see on the screen right now, and then we'll come back together to discuss it as a whole. Rupa's going to make magic happen.
Sorry, I was on mute. So we'll be dividing in the participants into 7 groups. So our capacity building volunteer, Ching, Juan, Pratana, Tina, Laura, Rose, and Sarah will lead each of the group. You'll know who is the leader of the group because your group name is named by them. You'll have 10 minutes to discuss, and after 10 minutes, you will come back to the main room to share your experience and discussion. So you need to join the room when I open the room. So there might appear a button that says join. So please click on that when you see that.
A little bit about the things you talked about in your small group. If you are ready to share something from your group, would you please raise your hand so we can call on you? Use the raise hand feature. I can't see. Who is ready to say something? I'm going to call on my group then, since I can't see anyone. Jay Devi, would you please start and say something about what we talked about in our group?
Yeah, thank you, Tina. Very surprisingly, our group, there's only 3 of us in the group. And Tina, and I think Rehanna, myself. And I did the talking. So as far as individual donor, we have approached, we have individual donors, and these individual donors are people who are passionate about guiding and what we are doing for the development of girls and young ladies. And the funding to us, it comes in 2. One is either cash or in kind. It depends on what we request for. And partnership, we do work with partners. And as I told Tina, that we get administrative grant from the Ministry of Youth and Sports. And
fine, thank you, Jagdev.
Yeah.
I want to hear a little bit from everyone. So
Thank
you
you.
for starting us off with that.
All right.
Another group, please.
I can't find her, but there was a woman in our group who talked about the run and the ongoing relationship. Are you there?
Is it Darshana that you're referring to?
I think so. I'm not finding you.
Maybe the country, if you can say.
Well, what I remember was that you were hosting a run and everyone did it every year. Who was that?
I think Ashit, Maldives.
Asus is from Thailand.
Okay. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thailand.
Thank you,
Could I make a
Joanne.
point? Could I make a point, please?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, in my group, I spoke about this with Laura, and I would like to make the point that we found success in raising funds from an organization that runs a school for hearing impaired children. When we made the ask and we were successful in raising a contribution from them, the point I want to make is that we felt half our work was done when we approached them, because they run, a lot of their goals are similar to ours. The way they work is similar to ours. The empathy was there, and they shared the same the same goals really, and were very much already sensitized to our to the work that we do, and therefore half the work was already done. And because they were already very much more moneyed than our organization, it was a successful ask, which they converted into, well, almost an annual grant now since the last so many years. So it helps to approach somebody who is loosely in the same field as us.
Great. That's a great story. Thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you. What other group have we not heard from?
From my group, the Maldivian participant, Firam Mohammed. Would you like to share what you shared in the discussion?
No, Pratana, maybe you need to paraphrase.
Yes. So she was mentioning about how, like, when they ask for donations, how people ask for the branding promotion during their programs, and also how far they have to give brand promotion for the company who is donating something, and how the visibility, what they should do and all. If I'm not wrong, yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing from that group. Let's see, Rose, Sarah?
Shamsa or Pichi would like to share?
In our group, we have two discussions, one of individual ask from raising money, and in my case, it's about from a official of UNICEF. We ask her personal support. Actually, we are engaging with her in some other project, but I got a chance to meet her, and we are going to have a meeting about some other project. But we asked her to, if she can facilitate us printing of our GAD pack, and or she can link with some partners. She was so excited about it, and she said, what is the GAD pack actually is. So when because in the terminology is a bit different from MDGs and these, we refer it as MDG activity pack, and she was very much excited when we share a draft with her, and we are very successful. She said, okay, it's not in the scope of that but project, but I try to manage it from some other project head, and they supported us in printing a huge amount of activity packs, which we freely distributed in all of our guides in our country, and it's a great partnership. Actually, they just give us, but one thing we are discussing in our group is that you have to ask, which is sometimes very difficult, that you are asking for something. and you have justification or like impact that what they are donating, how they impact others. So this is some key sharing from our group.
Thank you for your story. It illustrates the importance of relationships. Your relationship with a person who had other relationships with other people, and that was a great story. Thank you for that. Who else have I not heard from? Rose's group?
From my group, I think most of the people in my group have not done a face-to-face, and they find that doing the ask is very, very challenging, but they have learned quite a few things from the webinar. So maybe either Hawa or Chada from Thailand, you would like to share what what you think your next steps would be for your member organizations?
Yeah, as discussed, we said that we have quite few fundraising events where we focus on the third party or on outsiders for fund, but we have always failed or never looked into the inside fundraisings, which we learned through this webinar that we need to focus on an inside fundraising too, where we focus on our boards and everything. So that is one thing we learned when we, like everyone has mentioned in this webinar, that asking is difficult, but we do have done it successfully and some failed too. But one thing we learn is the inside fundraising.
Great. Thank you.
Maybe from
yes,
my group.
Rose's group.
There was either Tammy or Aileen could say something about the culture about asking, and there was something about acknowledgement. Tammy, Aileen, or Sabina?
Hi, I'm Tammy. So in our group, we discussed like how we should actually do a background check or understand more about the potential donor before we do the ask, and also we also kind of like compare what is the differences between the fundraising or the way of ask in different region or in different countries. Like for example, we mentioned that maybe in this part of the world we might not be comfortable to have a range of amount for the individual donor to choose from. It's more like that will actually make more like a cornering instead of like asking like how much they're able to contribute. So that's from my part. And I think Hong Kong also have something to share. Selena?
Yes, I just talk about, we have different kind of, acknowledgement, so that, people, if they want to donate, bigger amount, we have a better acknowledgement for them, maybe on our website or any report or during our any event, then we will have a word for them. And for, lower amount of donation, we do have acknowledgement, but maybe a smaller scales. So it's kind of an encouragement for them to make the donations.
Great, thank you very much.
And
yes,
yeah,
Prathan?
so actually I missed one thing that which we shared. So Grace will share what we discussed. Yes, Grace. Over.
Hi everyone. Firstly, I just like to say that I'm here because currently I work for the fundraising team in WEX under strategic partnership. So I like to hear what MOs think about fundraising and what you actually need, so that when we do our global pitch to the donors, then we are more relevant to you. So in our group just now, one of the members mentioned about their relationship with the general manager of Body Shop in the country. But when they started to talk about getting partnership or donations, then the conversation didn't manage to go further. So our suggestion is, I'm not sure whether you know that Body Shop is very into cost-related marketing, and there are many of the causes that they work on are very similar to us. For example, our Stop the Violence program, they do quite a lot of things on domestic violence, and also environment programs like climate change, recycling, wildlife protection. all these things are many things that we are already doing. So when we start to have conversations with companies like this, it's good to like bring in this into the conversation so that they also know that what we do are quite similar to them. And we also mentioned about making step-by-step approach to cultivate the donor. So for example, this first one, maybe they are not very convinced yet with our organization. What we can do is encourage them to maybe sponsor some in-kind things like the sample products of their company for our events. That is a first step. And then later on, we will be able to bring them to know more about us and go into larger partnerships or donations.
Thank you. I'm watching the time, and I feel like it's time for us to close up this conversation. We hope that we have brought you this framework of a case, a plan, and the ask, and that you will use that in a way that will be helpful as you think about asking for funding, raising funds from individuals, corporations, foundations, or government. And so with that, I pass it to, I'm not sure who takes it next. We're closing up, so Joanne?
Sure. So what's next? Next slide. Hopefully you will go back and look at your fundraising plan if you have one, and tweak it some. And if you don't have one, that you will develop one. You'll set a goal and make a plan. Also that you will continue learning more about fundraising. And I want to point out this guide that WAGS has developed that is very detailed. And Rupa will be putting together a resource library on a shared drive. We will share all the information from this webinar and some additional kind of samples of plans and other tips. If you know of good materials, let Rupa know. And so that you will be able to go back, and there will also be the recording of this webinar. We're also interested if there is additional information that you feel like you need in order to do fund development that's very specific, like writing grants or the strategic partnerships we just heard about, or online appeals. Prathama will talk about an evaluation tool in a minute. If you have additional ideas for follow-up webinars, please put that on your evaluation. And finally, our really terrific fund development capacity building team will be happy to work with you and your CAT mentors in kind of following up with this by doing some coaching or individual work with your MO. So if you let the region know that you are interested in some coaching or consultation, we can provide feedback on your plans. We can help monitor the progress and support you in what your next steps are. So also on your evaluation, if that's something that is of interest to you, please put that down. And finally, we really are grateful for your participation in this, your enthusiasm in the small groups, and we want to hear when you're successful and celebrate your successes with you. So thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over to Prathama.
Sorry, I was on mute. So actually, there were two questions. One, we will talk to Gwen later and connect with her and give the answer because it's a long question to explain. And about the policies, fundraising ethic policy, sorry, Tammy has asked whether we can share fundraising ethic policy with them most. Do you all have any suggestions? And
I think we can look for that for the resource
yeah,
corner.
also, yes. And yeah, when we are doing the resource library, we will collect all the material we have and upload all the policies. We have the child protection policy and everything, so that all the MOs have time to go through all the material. And if you all have any questions or clarifications, you all can contact Rupa or one of the AP committee members, your country coordinator, to get more information so that we can connect you all with the fund development team. So thank you for participating, and we will be sending the post evaluation form with the post webinar email, and we kindly request you to complete it and submit. And if you all have any interested topics, as Joanne said, you all can mention those, and we will take necessary steps to help support all the MOs. Yeah. And shall I then wrap up, Joanne? So do you all have anything else to say? Yeah. Okay. So on behalf of the APR committee, I would like to thank all the 12 MOs and 51 participants who joined today for the webinar. We really appreciate your commitment and the staying with us for all 2 hours. We also would like to thank our amazing WAGS volunteer fund development capacity building team, Joanne, Ching and others, Laura, Tina and all the other team members for facilitating this webinar. Without y'all, we would have not been able to conduct this webinar. I would like to thank Grace Cat Mentors for joining today. Finally, I would like to thank Rupa for the tremendous support and all coordination done from her side to make this webinar success. We will send, as I said, we will send the evaluation form with the post-webinar email, and we kindly request you to submit it. So our next webinar will be on going back to guiding. We will inform you all about the details as soon as possible. And actually these days, COVID-19 survey is happening. We thank all the MOs who have completed the survey. And if your MO has not submitted, please complete it as soon as possible, as the deadline will be on Monday, 31st August. So have a great day. Thank you, everyone. Patiently waiting until the end of the webinar, and hope you all got something new to take back and do fund development in your MOs. And thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Give a hand to everyone. Bye. Take care.